To the cloud. Welcome everyone to the MasterClass with Ashok Kalyanswamy, and I'm joined by the people in the community who are very interested in learning and staying in a state of what we call perpetual refresh. And today what we'd like to do, I'd like to introduce Ashok and give a little bit of background, and then we have a program that is interactive. Ashok is right now Chief Information Officer at Saxo Bank and a member of the bank's executive team. And he's responsible for the strategic direction and operations of the bank's global IT organization. And he serves as the leader of Saxo's IT team. And the background that I'll introduce, and he can also add to it, are, to me, what's interesting is to have 20 years experience working in different definitions of what IT has been and is and will look like in the future. And so there's always this theme of understanding what's ahead, whether it was within Lehman Brothers or at Macquarie Group in the securities group. And now at Saxo Bank, there's the reputation that I've seen his work in really looking ahead, both in terms of a technology, as well as in terms of business innovation and business models. There's also a side to it that I've been really impressed with. We worked together in Copenhagen FinTech, the Global Advisory Board. And from that organization, there have been unicorn after unicorn after unicorn created in a very short period of time, under 4 years. And it's been really interesting to watch the power of people like Ashok within an ecosystem to help lead and guide startups from their inception all the way through to global footprints. So with that, I'd like to welcome you, Ashok. First, welcome. And what did I leave out from your background?
Oh, nothing much. I mean, this is that's a lot of introduction on myself. So yeah, I've been 5 years at Copenhagen, 6 years in Hong Kong, going backwards with Macquarie and Nomura, 2 years in Nomura, London, and Lehman Brothers before that. And I don't know what you know about Saxo Bank, but we are a facilitator in global capital markets. Our business model is like Uber, Airbnb. On one end, you have traders as well as individual investors who want to trade global capital markets. And we democratize trading and investment and access to 88 markets around the globe. We get our liquidity, which is not cars or homes, in our case, in capital markets from other banks like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, or other big banks, which give us liquidity, which is like access to markets. So that's where we are. And we run all of technology here at Saxo because we are really a tech company with a banking license, as the CEO calls it. And we keep adding products and services, and constantly we keep reinventing ourselves just to keep up and be a bit future-proof, to use Andrea's terminology.
And so what we'd like to do is go to the next slide and talk about us as a group. And if you have a camera, this is like the one and only time we want you to be on camera because we're going to do a poll with our fingers. There are 4 options. The first one is with regards to leading digital transformation, which is the topic. To lead digital transformation, emphasis on leadership and digital and transformation. The first question we'd like to see you hold up either 1, 2, or 3, 4 fingers. Where are you most stuck? If you're imagining any of the above, either leading or leading something digital or overall leadership in terms of transformation, trying to get teams to do something different or something more dynamic, something more disruptive. So where do you usually feel most stuck if you've been involved in these, either as a leader or a team member? 1 is technology, 2 is process, 3 is people, 4 is future vision. Ready? 1, 2, 3, rock, paper, scissors, go. Okay, wait, we have a 3, a 3, a 3, a 3, a 3, and a 3.
What a shocker. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Ashok, respond to that, and then we'll do the second question. What are your thoughts about that? Do you agree, disagree?
I violently agree. Technology is easy, and pretty much everybody knows what needs to be done. But actually, digital transformation is very little about technology, but it's a change management exercise with people in the organization by far. And I heard everybody on the call, everybody is an expert out here, but And from a change management perspective, is preparing the organization for change and really start to articulate the why and get people's buy-in, right? And then really break the journey into baby steps so that people can get it. Not just saying, I'm going to be completely digital in 3 years and increase our revenues and NPS. That doesn't cut it for most people. We need to show people the baby steps. Then we need to show people what it means to them. Individually, is it going to affect the job? And we've got to have an open forum to take questions, and they need to feel safe and comfortable so that they can raise questions and we can answer them and take people on the journey. Because when digital transformation typically happens, senior people sit around for months trying to plan out what happened. They debate among themselves. And many a time people think, because we have thought this through, everybody's going to get it. But most people hear that for the first time. So really taking them on the journey and making sure in small cohorts, people understand what it means to them and really can raise questions and maybe even tune the journey or come up with better suggestions on how to go about doing it.
No, I was going to go to the next question, which is just so people, if they want to turn their cameras off, can in a moment. The second question is, we personally, so where do you personally believe you could have the most traction if you could master it? And same thing, the answers are the same, the questions change. So if you could master it to really make transformation happen, would you be able to focus on technology is 1, processes is 2, people is 3, future vision is 4. So let's do another rock, paper, scissors. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, interesting. So we have, and Rajiv is waiting.
I'm 2. I have some problem with my back. Yeah.
So you're 2?
I'm 2. Yeah.
Okay. So we have 2. Chen Yang is 2. Andrea 2. Vic. So we have 3, 3, 2, 2, 2, and another 2. So you can go off camera if you'd like to. That's the end of our on-face voting. So Ashok, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, people are spot on, because when we consider digital, it's not just, in our case, for instance, it's not just having a fancy app that people can log in and trade. Going digital means you've got to look at the entire customer journey and the entire value chain of your organization. You really have to understand that for each customer touch point, what happens in the company in terms of the processing to make sure the customer is serviced along the touch point. It could be trade, onboarding, end of day reporting in our case, or whatever your business caters for. So it's no point digitizing a bad process. So first we got to make sure the processes are clean. And once that's clean, then you apply the technology so that you digitize your entire processes, because digitization is digitizing the entire value chain of your company and not just the peripheral customer facing ones.
So I have a question we can go to the next slide. First of all, in terms of your background, you come from a pretty, somewhat traditional organizations that you've worked with, and yet Saxo Bank is probably one of the most disruptive models that we've seen and continues to disrupt. So the other day we talked about, can incumbents really disrupt? Can incumbents reinvent? Can incumbents, and I laugh because Saxo Bank is both, innovative as well as an incumbent. Now, first of all, what's the background of Saxo Bank, and do you view yourselves as an incumbent or a disruptor, or both?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Saxo Bank is a fintech before fintech was coined. So it's now 29 years in the journey. And we have grown. And however, what we keep realizing we can't suddenly become one of those big banks. And we've got to maintain a competitive edge and go back to acting more like a fintech rather than a big bank, right? So that means having a really open mindset that we have to adapt. We can't just do lip service of being customer centric, but we got to be customer centric. Look at all the processes and then start to be digital and even work together in a different way rather than in a siloed approach, so that we are really nimble and we can really respond to all whatever a customer wants. So right. So yes, incumbent in some ways, but at the same time, not completely old, and we just keep trying to be ahead of the curve and have an open mindset.
So I think it would be very valuable because people in this group especially have learned what we call the 3-beat story or the 4-beat story, where it's in the beginning, there was this vision, and then we had this opportunity challenge, and then we saw, we implemented this, and here was the success. So it's a very short story. You have a couple of examples that I believe are game changing from your company's perspective of you saw ahead of the future, you developed a challenge for yourselves and brought in, I don't know, partners or technologies or something. Very, these are short beats, right? The project looked like this and the impact was that. What's a short example for people who aren't as familiar with one of your cool initiatives from Saxo Bank?
Right. One of the things which we started, which actually came from the ground up initially, was there was a person who wanted to take some time to experiment with virtual reality, and we just gave that person the time. And a couple of years later, the person came and gave a demo of that. We sponsored that, and then we said, okay, how can we use this technology in a meaningful way? So it's for meeting rooms, communication, global communication, education, and even if it's not virtual reality with all the devices, because during COVID, there could be logistic challenges, but all the associated stuff we started to use so that we can really collaborate digitally. I mean, that's one thing. There are many things, the use of AI. Again, AI is a very broad and generic term, but for us, we are in the business only if the customer wins. And for the customer to win, we really need to know who the customer is. And to know who the customer is, you need to build a 360 view of the customer. So once you build a 360 view, if it's an FX trader or a stock trader, how do you give them timely and relevant information to help them win? And that could be what's happening in the markets, or maybe there's some news feeds, Twitter feeds, evaluation, things which are happening, which could be relevant in a very timely manner, which could either prevent large losses or help gains for investors and traders. So those are some of the things we use from a digital engagement perspective to provide timely information, right? So it's more full bite-sized chunks.
So I think it's interesting because you have expertise, although, on paper, you're one type of company. You actually have in your DNA this idea of using VR, not just to use VR to be fancy and tricky, but to really understand. And you were early in that game. AI, same thing. So many people, and a few people on the call today are really have a lot of deep expertise in AI, and yet a lot of people don't use it to its full advantage, because I think the third part you talked about is the customer knowledge. And so the combination of cool, nifty technologies and innovative thinking, as well as AI, so that you really understand, the underpinnings of the knowledge base and the data and the richness and insights. But then the third, which is the customer need. And I think that's a really interesting construct. By the way, we'll do a short interview here, and then we'll have the group chime in as well. So let me get through a couple more. What are the challenges? I mean, first of all, just in general, when we're thinking of things that are, we're talking about teams and leaders, what are the biggest challenges that you see inside your bank, but also, you have a vantage point into so many other companies. What do you think the biggest challenges really are when you analyze them?
Well, again, it goes back to people, right? And if you build, it's about people and culture. And as Peter Drucker once said, culture is strategy for breakfast. So from my perspective, no matter what industry you're in, if you get that part right, and you can really drive change. You can build team trust, and you can really solve any problem you want to. And people are then focused on solving real world problems, of being truly customer centric, and really helping customers win. Because in the end, all this, why do you do all of this technology? It's not for technology's sake. It's with a purpose, and that you need to have a purpose. In our case, it's really helping the customer win. And so, as long as you use the tools, technology properly with and arm the people with that, explain the why, then it's about automatically the customer wins and then you win. So it starts with the foundation of people, culture, and then drive it forward.
Well, I love that. And, we don't want to get too into the weeds on tools, but is there one tool that actually, because we've talked a lot, we talked about technology, processes, people, future vision. We didn't get a whole bunch of people raising their hand with enthusiasm about the tools. However, you have a great career in understanding which tools can make huge differences, both internally as well as for your customers. Do you have one great story of a tool that really made a difference, so that we can hear about the technology or a tool that you found useful?
Yeah, I would say it's a technology per se, but it's more of a method. And the book I'm a big fan of is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you read it, because it talks about an executive team, and they really struggle to drive vision, drive strategy, and get results for the firm. And it does it in a very nice and in a good storybook way. But before you talk about the results, right, you need to have a foundation of trust, and it's a team trust, not bilateral trust. If you have team trust, you can have a proper conflict, because people are not afraid to speak their mind, and you can have a healthy debate. Then comes commitment, the Jeff Bezos principle of 80% agreement, 100% commitment, and people walk away committed to whatever thing they want to achieve, digital or transformation or whatever it is. And then they hold each other accountable. And if you do all of that, the results for the company automatically come. So we have kind of mastered that almost as a process. So when we pull together various disparate teams to do various different things, we pay a lot of attention to this pyramid and getting it right, because the results then follow.
Well, I have a question about that, because the talent for being able to do that, when a lot of us were trained or coming up through the ranks, we were taught this is what a leader looks like. This is how to enable teams. And a lot of it doesn't feel like it's working. I don't know what it's like for everybody else, but I was just doing a workshop with Gen Zs, and it's like, wow, nothing is the way we were taught. Different values, different leadership requirements. It's just a different world, as well as we were talking about NFTs and some other technologies and new things on the market. What is it, if you were going to talk about the competencies that will be in high demand in the future, and what you really think the next wave of talent needs to include to deal with all of these challenges especially in, I think everything is going through digital transformation. What's the talents that we need?
Good. I think it starts, I'm sorry, I'm being a bit of a psychologist out here. Well, a lot of people come with really, really good technical skills. Maybe they have good project management, program management skills. But if I'm looking at leaders, it's really having a growth mindset and being open to change. Because technology evolves at an exponential scale. And if you're in the topic of technology, Many of these technologies can help people win, but then again, it goes back to how can you be open to understanding what's happening, what's out there, and are you ready to disrupt yourself and not just think, hey, you solved world hunger, but are you open to new ideas? Can you learn from mistakes? Can you adopt new things? So I think the key thing is having a growth mindset, and that's the number one thing I would look for in a leader, and see some examples there.
So let's go to the last slide that's formal, and then we'll have Sean and Shenyang. We'll invite them to do a little bit more follow-up interview, and as well as, you know, all of the people in the group. We are on video, but, you know, we would love to have questions from the group. And the first one might be around how you measure the impact, because that was a question that came up a moment ago. But this is a model that I really have been compelled by, first of all, because you have such a deep technical expertise, and a lot of people in this group and in our listening and watching audience are also have technical mindsets. We call it a venture technologist, and so it's the as you know the ability to understand business models cross industry and customer impact and ecosystem building as part and parcel of the technology mindset. So walk us through this, and I wouldn't mind if you walked us through a bit, because we have people who sometimes listen to these. We have 7 things on the list that are sort of the world according to Ashok. What are your rules of thumb in terms of how to really foster innovation? You've talked about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Walk us through your 7 steps.
Right. The first thing is, when you want to foster innovation, people can make mistakes. People will make mistakes. You will definitely go down the wrong path. It's not that everybody's going to come up with a brilliant idea to take your company or launch a new product or whatever you want to do. The key thing is to have a culture of psychological safety, so that people are free to experiment and can fail, and it's like it's a blameless postmortem. You learn from it and just try the next thing. So it's really, really important that the psychological safety. Second thing is always ask what you're solving for, and what you want solved, and then let it be, right? Everybody, most senior people have a very good idea of how to solve the problem. But what I found is, before stating my solution and say, let's go this way, I let people say, okay, this is a problem to be solved. How do you go about solving it? And we have become a big fan of co-creating a solution, right? And it may turn out that the group may come up with what you had thought of to begin with, and you can always challenge any holes in there. But once they do that, they own the solution. So it's not being top down. They're emotionally vested in all of that. All right. Observation, again, it's kind of co-creating the solution, see what people come up with, and then go from there. The other thing, sometimes another trick we used at the previous company was, sometimes you're stuck. Either you have a problem, it's an operations problem, it's a technology problem, it's a marketing problem. Then what we do is we say people, hey, we are not, as sitting in an executive team, we may not be in the day-to-day details of what problems are actually happening on the ground. You only see the result. So you ask people, hey, you're knee-deep in the day-to-day. Are there any ideas of how to, do you see a problem and do you see a solution? And then people came up saying, hey, this is a problem I solved, and this is a possible solution. And then we asked people to crowdsource with a number of points what the idea was, because then people identified with the problem and the solution could come up with a whole bunch of points which we presented to us. So we knew that, hey, a lot of people believed in the problem and the solution, and then we did an MVP and followed that up, right? Tap into people's interests. That's what we did with virtual reality. It was nowhere close to anything commercial, but we gave a person 1 day a week to go and do the thing, and then come back and one day present to us something which is interesting, commercial, and useful, right? And then these are some examples of events, and what will be and what the future will require. Again, there are many different tactics one can use to really make progress in your company, to drive innovation. And the future just requires is using many tools in your tool chest and having an open mindset.
So I'll go to Chen Yang first. Chen Yang, why don't I have you do some cross conversation, and then we'll go to Sean.
Sure, sounds good. First of all, Ashok, these are great stuff. I actually resonate tremendously with every point you said. There was one thing you mentioned, which really I found was really well articulated, is you said it's not about the bilateral trust, but it's about the team trust. And then when you have that,
Yes.
you can have conflict. That's very profound. I have never, at least I haven't heard people articulate that way, but that's exactly my experience. That it was 4 years into my general management running Siemens Tech Venture, and I felt I was doing the bilateral trust, but the team trust part, I think I failed. So, and I paid a big price for that. But anyhow, so I have a question. This is great. So I think when I was running the Siemens Tech Venture, so I have a group of really like venture technology directors, and they're amazing, right? They can take on any CEOs of Siemens business unit and then have a conversation, even challenge their point of view, or external CEOs and of startups and investors, and they themselves, many of them were former either serial CEO or in the senior executive position in company. So I love that. That's why I signed up that job, and so I get different variety of message, and they can in front of me say things that other type of people may not. But then I run into a problem with that group of people myself. It was in the 4th year, and as I said about the team trust thing, I wasn't fostering as much, was more focusing on productivity. And then we had a massive reorg, and then the role of this unit in the Silicon Valley was changed, and then we have another layer added because it was successful, and the corporate add more layers. And it has, I would say, really got the motivation, the culture that we have built down to the ground. We have to rebuild it, and that's when this ability to speak differently, disagree, and have different opinion, very strong-willed, become challenge for me because I couldn't align them, and into a common vision, and I was struggling with that. So I wonder, I think the situation is not unique, right? If you have driving digital transformation, you have cases where people, experts, leaders, they disagree, and you cannot, really align them on a common vision. Where do you start doing it? And what are some tips you can give to us to really get this going over that hurdle, I would say?
That's oh my God, that is definitely a very tough nut to crack, right? To get people to agree. One thing we did was we had violent agreement. In our case, even such a simple thing you may think like moving to the cloud, people will say, 26 years, we've been hugely successful. Who the hell are you to come and tell us we need to move to the cloud? Yeah. Things were perfectly well, right? And there were senior engineers, 50 of them in the room, and it was all, anyway. So instead of saying moving to the cloud, we gave them the solution. We said, look, these are the problems we are trying to solve, right? I want to deploy multiple times a day. I want to do this. These are the problems I want to solve. Then what we did was we did an all-day workshop. We split people into different groups and said, first of all, what do you think the problems are, right? Then as a group, we worked out to prioritize the top 3 things. Then we split people into more cohorts and say, okay, the group agreed these are the 3 things you got to do. How are you going to solve it? And everybody came up with different solutions. Then we again prioritized and slowly started a funnel approach till finally at the end of the day, we got some semblance of agreement as to really what are the top 3 things we are going to do and how to go about doing it. And by the way, who's going to do it so that we can follow up on that, right? And then I use this approach, we use this approach a few times. I'm saying, is it a cookie cutter approach which will work everywhere in every company? I'm not sure, but it's something, it kind of worked for us.
Mhm.
And I guess at the end of the day, we cannot also get into analysis paralysis and keep debating till the cows come home.
Yeah.
At some point, you may have to come and say, look, I heard all of you, because most of the time people just want to feel heard, right? If you do something without hearing them out, they feel not valued, right?
Mhm.
So if some of these techniques don't work in the end, we say, look, this is what we got to do, and this is why. And I heard all of you, but this is why I'm choosing to do what I want to do, and we got to get moving. Others will be here for the next 6 months debating about it, right?
Mhm.
But hopefully that's the last resort of pulling your stars and stripes and coming up with something to do top down.
Wow, this is great. Yeah, I think basically you iteratively trying to bring them on board, but also you have a deadline.
Yes,
Not debated for 6 months. At a certain point, this is why leader stands up and say, hey, I heard you,
exactly.
etc. I mean, this is such profound. I did not realize that, again, as my 4th year of my general manager. Fortunately, I also have one of the most veteran CEO of Siemens Healthcare. He's been all units, and he retired, and he was on my board. So he observed the dynamics. He actually said the second part, not the first part. He actually said, if you only build by consensus, that's my style before, we don't need a leader, because leader has to make hard decisions, even when people, you cannot get them on board. But the key thing is to have them feel they heard, and then you basically have to make a decision and tell them, I heard you, but we move this way. I need your support, right? If you're wrong, we can change again. So I think, but the first part, then using this iterative approach, try to get some sort of assortment, remove some big boulders, and then using leadership to really have a cutoff date, and so you can move the transformation forward. And that combination is very potent. You're more than saying this maybe opening your bank, but I certainly see this could be very valuable for a variety of these tough situations. Thank you for that. That's really a sage wisdom.
Yeah, much appreciated. These are, it's painful learnings, by the way. It's not easy. We had to go through a lot of trial and error and finally settled on this.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess, John.
Ashok, I'm going to ask you something that could put you in a very controversial moment here. So I'm prefacing all of this by that. It's a fairly oblique question, but I just did some research on the side here, and the amount of CEOs on the FTSE 100 that have had technology in their background has tripled over the last 4 years. All right. I'm going to square another piece of information. 75% of the executive suite thinks they can make really good decisions based on technology and trends that are coming at them. Meanwhile, only 30% of their employees agree. So with those two things in mind, is being a CTO, a CIO, almost the new avenue into the CEO chair because of all the interdependencies that we've talked about in this discussion so far? Like, is technology such a core part of what's going on that, potentially 10 years ago, we might not have seen the CIO as the candidate to be the head of the company, but now it's so important they need to be. So brag if you will, but I'm curious more in terms of how it's changed over the last 10 years and maybe where it's going over the next 10.
Sorry, who are you asking this to?
You, Ashok.
Me.
A CIO of an illustrious company that, I don't want your CEO quaking in their shoes, but.
No. Actually, I was Googling, and was it Revolut or some other really up and coming startup, but the CEO is the CIO, or what the CIO is the CEO. It comes from a tech background. I think I've seen a few other small companies where the CTO became the CEO. Look, it doesn't matter. right? I think it boils down to a few things. There's a really, it really boils down to people, right? And of course, it's the digital world. I think no matter who sits in the chair, a knowledge of technology is essential. But I think a knowledge of how to get people together, of having a vision of how to communicate and how to take people on the journey, whether it's your board or your employees or your customers, taking them all on the journey. I think those skills are more important, and it matters less whether what background you come from.
Have you seen a change in your own cohort of peers over the last few years, that they're much more people-centric in their focus and maybe less of the tech focus?
I think people are making a conscious, people are realizing like what makes a difference, and people are coming to a realization about that. And it's something we put a lot of emphasis at our place. And I wish I know what I know now in some of my previous companies, and I would have gone back in time and did my job a bit better if I had a time machine. But you know, with my experience, is what I say, right? It's in the end, in most companies, it begins with the people, and people leadership is something which is most valued.
Well, thank goodness you had the psychological safety back then to make all those mistakes to get to the place where you are today. That's great.
No.
I'm gonna flip it back to Andrea. Thank you for
That's
that.
great.
Ashok. Appreciate it.
So Mohsin, Rajiv, Michelle, anybody who's on, if you'd like to either put a question in the chat, or if you'd like to get on camera, or if you'd like to just ask a question, we're open to that before we do kind of a wrap with Ashok. So any questions? Anybody want to address anything?
No, I think I was quite, intently listening, and I guess as I think Chengyan mentioned, it's sage wisdom. I think what was summarized in terms of leadership and digital transformation, I think I can't agree more to what is written there. I mean, it's a lot about you need to succeed not in the most complicated problem that you're solving, but you should be able to show success. You got to have leadership and understanding that as well. So I agree, and the psychological aspect, psychological safety, as it's mentioned, is so critical because it's not part of a normal fabric, especially in a structured organization which is already running. I mean, cloud native, we should not mix up between cloud native organizations and non-cloud native, and the majority are non-cloud native. I mean, even Siemens is non-cloud native, so it's not a cloud native company. We are all trying to become cloud native, or businesses that are platform centric. But the fact that failure is not viewed properly, the fear of keeping the momentum going. So yeah, I completely agree that these are all critical. You may see clearly that there is not something else shattering around technology written there, but I think most of it is about the way we think, the way we prioritize, the way we pick our priorities. All that becomes critical. I mean, in AI, I've heard that it is not the most complicated problem that we should start with. I mean, we should start with things that can be quickly embraced. We should know what is relevant to our business rather than trying to figure out what is the most complex. So yeah, I completely agree, and thanks Ashok for sharing and this.
So Mohsin or Michelle, anybody else want to chime in? And if not, we'll ask sort of the magic question round. If anybody has something, I have one last little question. Anybody else want to chime in with the question? Maybe not. Okay. I was wondering a question that came up earlier, which is, how do you show with tangible evidence that any innovation is working? And in your case, it doesn't have to be innovation, but maybe, yes, I can give you evidence that this digital transformation is working. When your senior leadership asks you, how's it going? Show me your report card. What's the format that seems to be what is meaningful in that area?
Okay, who are you asking that to, the audience?
No, I think it's you. The audience was asking us earlier, how do,
Right.
it's like not good enough to say everyone seems to be happy and we got 50 new ideas. That doesn't seem to be the currency that senior leadership necessarily is buying these days. And it's challenging to show, to come back and report on a transformation effort. What are maybe two metrics work?
Yeah, I think it really, now you have to be a cold-blooded business person, right? It's not about doing technology for technology's sake or transformation for transformation's sake, right? Does it improve NPS, for instance? Does it improve, have the revenue channels increased? Have you reduced cost in any way because you optimize some process and it become all technology? And can you show that, for instance, in our case, the cost per trade has gone down because you have become digital, so there has to be some commercial metrics, NPS, TRE, money-making logic, cost, complexity, a few things. And that should be the outcome. The result should be the outcome, which you can measure.
Great. So I'll just close the formal conversation. First of all, this was really interesting. I think that your depth of knowledge and expertise was really interesting. I think Sean's point about, senior leaders who don't have technical backgrounds are probably at a disadvantage. And then technologists that don't have a people skills are probably at a disadvantage. And as you just said, people in general who are leaders who don't have at least a little bit of some cold-blooded business in them are probably at a disadvantage. And this notion of being able to see ahead of corners and be able to see that virtual reality could actually be applied in a way that brings you market share is a big idea. So what I come away with is the complex and very important set of dimensions that is required for a great leader right now. And to be what we always talk about, adaptive intelligence, to have a sense of, as you said, a growth mindset and being able to see that you need to get good at something. It's a challenge. I mean, I think it's really challenging. That's my takeaway. Ashok, what's your takeaway from the conversation and what would you like to leave us with?
You said it, it's adaptive and having a growth mindset. That's it. Everything follows after that.
Well, that's great. And with that, we will thank you formally and turn off the recording. Thank you, Ashok Kalyanswamy, who has joined us from Saxo Bank to talk about really the notion of transformation, leading digital transformation, what it really takes, and how to be prepared to future-proof. So thank you, Ashok, and thanks to everyone listening and watching.
Thanks all for the great conversation. Good questions, great questions, actually.